where we are right now, this at the time was called McFadden Lane because the eastern terminus is the McFadden Farm. Now, it was run by a woman named Holly McFadden. You might have seen in our visitor center in the last room, one of the last things you see on the wall is an invoice from Holly McFadden to the United States government requesting compensation for all the damage that the Union soldiers did while they were occupying her farm. My understanding is that she got a little bit of that back, but not all of it, because they couldn't verify exactly which side she supported, so they gave her a little bit of it. So, I guess it pays to be loyal. So, you have McFadden Lane here. It is a historic road. It is now called Van Cleve Lane, named after one of the generals that served here. This would have been an absolute mess 152 years ago today, because the start of the battle is very near here, and by the time it erupts through this area, this in particular in the woods back here, it turns into a bloody mess. It's a really bad situation. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in just a second. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about how we get to this point, particularly in the war, but also here in Murfreesboro. This is late 1862, December 31st is when this battle starts, New Year's Eve. And the Army of the Cumberland is the Union Army that's here. It's commanded by a guy named William Rosecrans. He's relatively new in command of this army. He'd been brought up to replace a man named Don Carlos Buell, who had won at a battle in October, in Perryville, Kentucky, but he was relieved of his duty anyway because he didn't win big enough. Lincoln expected a lot out of his generals, and if you did not completely follow up on your opponent and crush them whenever possible, you were relieved. And you saw that a lot throughout the war. He starts getting frustrated with Rosecrans because Rosecrans is in Nashville, and this is an army that's a little battered because they had just gone through a fairly large battle at Perryville. And he's a new commander. He doesn't know exactly what he has. He's still trying to find a lot of horses for his cavalry, still trying to just figure out the ropes. Meanwhile, Braxton Bragg, who's in command of the Army of Tennessee, he's down here in the Murfreesboro area. They're basically setting up winter camp. I don't think he's expecting a big fight at this point. It's cold, it's rainy, it's nasty, it's typical Tennessee winter. He has his men spread out for several miles in either direction from Murfreesboro, foraging for food. And early December, when they get here, he actually has close to 50,000 troops, a much larger number than will be engaged at the battle once it starts. That's one of the reasons why Rosecrans is a little hesitant about picking a fight, because he only has about 45,000 men at his disposal. One thing that happens, though, that makes him a little more apt to come down here is Halleck, who is the quartermaster general of the Union Army, starts sending him texts saying, not texts, sorry, I'm talking to my daughter, telegrams, 1860 texts, and he says, LOL, Rosecrans, no, he says, you're getting fired if you don't get out of it, go down there and start picking a fight, and he sends several of those, and Lincoln is very dissatisfied with Rosecrans, and he's literally this close to replacing him with someone else, when Rosecrans gets some intelligence from this area, that a few things have happened that are really game changers. Because it's the dead of winter, Bragg's not expecting a fight. He's sending these guys off to scavenge and forage, and in this case, to raid. He has sent two of his cavalry divisions, one commanded by John Hunt Morgan, another one by Nathan Bedford Forrest. Forrest goes off to West Tennessee, where the Battle of Parker's Crossroads actually occurs the day that this battle starts. That's his famous charge them both ways moment. Then you have John Hunt Morgan, who goes up for his Christmas raids up into the Kentucky area. Morgan actually notes in his journal on December 31st that he thinks the Battle of Stones River just started. He can actually hear, he thinks he can hear the battle 75 miles away. I don't know, I've never tried. It's fairly flat between here and there, and this was rather loud. So you have about 7,000 cavalry guys out of the picture now. What also happens is Jefferson Davis comes to town in the second week of December to inspect the troops. Bragg is not a well-liked man. He has had lots of complaints lodged about him by his commanding officers, citing basically just incompetence, and they're worried that he's going to get them all killed. So Jefferson Davis comes to town to investigate some of these. He's here under the guise of inspecting the troops and to hand out some promotions and some accommodations, that kind of thing. But he's really here to see if Bragg needs to be replaced. He decides Bragg does not need to be replaced, but one thing he does do is he takes an entire infantry division and he sends them to Vicksburg, Mississippi. You have another 6,000 or 7,000 infantry gone under Bragg's control, mostly because Generals Grant and Sherman are moving on Vicksburg, Mississippi at that very moment, about to begin their siege, which turns into a 6-month-long ordeal that doesn't get broken until the summer of '63. So all of a sudden, this army of 50,000 that Bragg is in control of is now down to about 38,000. So now Rosecrans knows he has the upper hand. The time to strike is now. So he takes his army, who he's fairly sure is a good one at this point, and they begin the long journey from Nashville on December 26, 1862, down 3 different routes. One as far over to the south and the west, Triune, one right down the middle on Franklin Pike, another one over a little bit to the east on Murfreesboro Pike. They'll all rejoin here on the 29th of December, kind of find their way around in the dark. It is after dark. There's a little bit of action that night, but not much to speak of. On the 30th, they spend all day solidifying their lines, and this road becomes a very large portion of the line. Right back here in all these woods, you're going to have thousands and thousands of Union troops. Just across those fields where Thompson Lane is now, where those cars are driving, you might be able to see some of the cannons that we have perched on the little rise there on the other side of the road. That represents the Confederate line right here, very close. In our visitor center, you might have seen our musical display. There's a song called Home Sweet Home, and the legend goes that one of the regimental bands, the brass band, started playing that song on the night before the battle, and the other regimental bands for the Confederates started playing along. Before you know it, you have regimental bands and young soldiers all up and down these lines singing that song, Home Sweet Home. You can imagine they were probably all pretty homesick at this point. No one got to go home for Christmas. It's cold, they're miserable. It rained on them the entire way up here from Nashville. They're running out of food. Their supply wagons with their blankets are miles behind them. They're not allowed to have any campfires because they can't give away their positions. It's a nasty situation for everyone involved on both sides. So that brief moment of unity with music had to be heartwarming for everyone involved. However, the next morning, Braxton Bragg and William Rosecrans have a very similar game plan as far as how to start this battle. They're both going to run straight on in to their opponent's right, and that means kind of looks like a yin-yang. Now, the benefit of Bragg having these open fields is that he doesn't have a whole lot of guys in front of him to stop him initially. Rosecrans, however, has the Stones River, the actual river. And so his plan is to cross that river, which is about 4 feet deep. It's swollen, it's flood stage, it's been raining, it's freezing cold. These guys are wearing next to nothing. They're lucky if they have a frock coat. Most likely they're wearing just the normal blue wool suits that are in the summertime too hot, in the wintertime not warm enough. And they have to cross this with their rifles above their heads. Well, not long after the battle starts, they're ordered to cross it back because they've learned that the entire right line, specifically the division under the control of Richard Johnson, he's a general that is typically in control of cavalry and has been put in front of infantry here. They're not ready for this at all. Bragg goes to town right at daybreak. Some of them begin moving before daybreak in the dark. So when they hit that line, some of these young men are still making their coffee, watering their horses. There are even reports of guys getting shot in their tents. They are not ready to go. All of a sudden you see this entire division just splinter. It goes in every direction. On our troop movement maps, normally regiments are notated by rectangles, either blue ones or red ones. Well, around 7 in the morning on our maps, you'll notice that instead of rectangles, there are dots with arrows. That's because the regiments just completely obliterated and they go in every different direction. Bragg's plan is working perfectly. Now, by the time they get here, it's a much different story because there are 2 divisions here with veteran leaders, guys that have been around for a long time. You have Philip Sheridan a little bit further over here to our west, and he's in control of an entire division. Right where we are right here, this is James Negley. Now both these guys are career military guys. They know what they're doing. They actually got together the night before, and they could see the enemy. They could hear them getting ready to go to war. They know what it sounds like. They know what it looks like. So they actually go to their commanding officer, their corps commander, a guy named Alexander McCook, a guy with a very sketchy reputation. They call him Old Chucklehead. That's the affectionate name his soldiers have for him, which is not good. And he has a propensity for drink. They find him asleep up against a fence row like this one, and they alert him to the issue. He says, "That's nice, you know, whatever. and does not report their findings to the commanding officer, William Rosecrans. And so, whereas every other division is basically asleep at 6 in the morning, these two are ready to go. They are locked and loaded, they are in these rocks, they have taken these natural fortifications and made them even better, and they're ready when these Confederates start streaming across these fields. So, right now we're going to take a walk back into these woods, and I'll show you how nature plays a huge role here at the Battle of Stones River in providing shelter and also providing a very difficult situation for the Confederate artillery, who you won't hear much about after this portion of the battle because there's not much to tell about. I'm open to